Hi, everyone, and welcome to the lunch. Yeah, okay. My name is Yusuf Sumare. I think yesterday you saw me, and then you are seeing me again. Okay. Before I introduce you to the speaker of today, just let me just make one quick announcement. For those of you who need certificates for the participation here, go to the reception. Les certificates are already there. Okay? Donc, pour ceux d'entre vous qui ont besoin des certificats de participation, parce qu'il y en a qui m'ont demandé, allez-y à la réception. Les certificats sont prêts là-bas. Okay? Donc, vous allez pouvoir les récupérer là où vous êtes inscrit. Okay? Then just go to the reception and then you will be able to get them. And then, having said that, now I will introduce our next speaker, our next guest speaker for today's lunch. Okay. I might say, Michel Poulton, I will introduce to you, is more African than most of us here. And you will see why I'm saying that, right? Then Dr. Michel Poulton was vice president for international programs of a major NGO, Richmond-based Chad Fund International. And previously, she was West Africa Director for Save the Children, an anthropologist with UNICEF in Afghanistan, and a researcher at the Collège Coopératif de Paris and the Royal Institute for International Affairs at Chatham House in London. Before her retirement from Chad Fund International, Michelle was responsible for program standards, result monitoring, and evaluations in 40 countries. Dr. Poulton's brand career spanned 25 years as a manager of major child development programs in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. One of her innovations was the promotion of women's development and entrepreneurship in order to improve the incomes of mothers and the empowerment in the family and the community. Michel recognized very early, before any international organizations, that mothers in Africa and Asia are often themselves children, young teens, and have been forced into marriage before their bodies or their minds are ready for childbirth. Dr. Michel Poulton is recognized as a leader in evaluation and monitoring of women's and children's protection programs, the creator of internationally admired standards of excellence for human rights and child rights. She has technical expertise in managing women's organizations and income-generating activities in community development and human rights issues in child development, health and education, and basic needs, right-based approach to development. Then you see she has a lot of experience, and you want to hear from her. For several years, Michelle held the presidency of the International NGO Committee on UNICEF. She was awarded a gold medal for her work in Eastern Europe, building child development agencies post-Berlin Wall. As an innovator in West Africa, Michelle led civil society in Mali as chair of Ben Aid and Live Aid Fund Committee, founder of Groupe Pivot Santé, and as the elected General Secretary of Mali's National NGO Committee, CCA-ONG. And she she was educated at Oxford and Sorbonne, and she has a dual citizenship from French and British. And she has been made, above all, honorary citizen of the Gambia, actually. Then you can see Michelle is more African than most of us, and also a lady with a great art, actually. Then join me in welcoming, actually, Michelle for a keynote speaker. Okay, then Michelle, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody. Can you hear me? I was very impressed with that introduction. I think it was, thank you very much for your compliments. What I want to say is that I have a very deep commitment to Africa and particularly women in Africa, and to making lives better and providing decent futures for children, because that was my focus, the focus of my work. And I chose to do this to work with the nonprofits and civil society organizations. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience of working with the nonprofits and civil society and building communities and building income generation opportunities, what you need to manage those. And then what I'm going to talk about a little bit is civil society and the social economy in countries, and then the complementary role of CBOs, CSOs, community-based organizations, because in African societies there are many community-based organizations through which people come together. They have a real culture of working together at their community levels. And then I will talk about the NGOs and CSOs. So my whole career has been in the nonprofits, Save the Children, Child International, and all with the UN organizations. And I had a particular focus on children and their well-being. And this, of course, included the need to strengthen and empower civil society and build on local social and solidarity structures. And we all know that that exists in many places in Africa, that there are solidarity groups, there are age groups. In Mali, the Ton, there were the hunters groups, there were groups. So they are very accustomed to working together for the good of their communities. So what I considered were the assets in villages and communities were important to build on in engaging communities to develop themselves. So some examples of what I was able to achieve. I worked for six years in a circle in Mali, in Kolondieba. Don't know if people know that. The Malians know Kolondieba. And worked very hard. They had plans and ambitions. And together we did these things. We mobilized, we gathered data. We had a demographic survey of the whole organization. We asked what their aspirations were, what the community wanted to do. And some of the solidarity structures that we saw, and every village in those 150 villages that we were working in had some sort of village development committee. They were amazingly organized, so we were able to build on their experiences. So I think one of the first events that we had was the national vaccination campaign. And we were saying it's very important to get everybody out on the vaccination campaign. So everybody was going around the villages with their loudspeakers. The town crier was saying, come on, come to be vaccinated. And it was a fantastic turnout. The other was that we dialogued. We explained to them things, that things were explained, is that that were a bit culturally delicate. For example, I can take the example of neonatal tetanus, for example, for women of childbearing age. That was a particular thing. And they didn't want to be vaccinated, actually, while they were pregnant. But we managed to persuade them that this was for their good, because we'd found, actually, that it was a high, very high mortality rate of children from neonatal tetanus. So that was eliminated in one fell swoop. And then the idea was use the strengths in those communities. We had 23% school rate, school attendance rate in Kolojeva. What we did was discuss with them. It was of great concern. It was of great concern to the villagers. And so we got around, we said, well, what do you want? What do you want in your schools? And they said, well, we just want our children to be able to at least read and write, and to value the traditions and come back for the good of our community. And so we negotiated with the government, and we decided to set up village schools. So we had a village school program that was hugely successful and produced in a UNESCO document. And it was a wonderful experience. We also had, and this is something that is extremely valuable, credit and loans society, caisse d'épargne de logement, right. So we were also giving out loans and so on. So women were a very important part. I'd like to talk about women and men entrepreneurs. They're amazing entrepreneurs. They are willing to undertake a lot of things if they are enabled to do so. And so the women were businessmen. You saw all the women in their behind the stalls at the market. Markets were run by women. They had their small industry. They had vegetable farming. They had their own small enterprises, if you like. And they just needed some assistance with expanding and developing their activities. When I arrived, the life of the non-profits was more or less non-existent. And all I could say is that I think that the development of the whole civil society sector is a huge bonus for countries. I've always worked through there. And there are very many examples, is what I'm saying, building on women entrepreneurs. There are many examples of women entrepreneurship, both in agriculture and different projects. They were looking to produce more for the community and improve their communities. It is probably true also to say that men have probably benefited more from credit loans programs in the past. And it was usually in most of these countries in West Africa, agricultural was mostly for food transformation, groundnut paste, and for karité, which was the local, beurre de karité, and those things. So in entrepreneurship and understanding societies, and actually was helpful, I just want to bring a personal note, is that I had done a PhD in Sciences Sociales du Développement. So what is important is to, when you're working in these sorts of areas, it's the understanding comes for how communities can improve their lives. And the understanding comes from living with people and making an analysis of people's lives, especially of women and children in a rural community. And it's true that you can change societies, and societies can play a huge role in improving their own lives, but only if you understand the society you're working with. Actually, it has been much easier. I began life in my professional life in Afghanistan, and that was really, really difficult because we couldn't see, the women were closed behind high walls, and they didn't have community structures. What I find especially helpful and inspiring in Africa is the solidarity structures and the structures that exist in village communities in Africa. And that is what I always try to build on in my work. So what is the social economy? I've mentioned the social economy, and it's in a conference about business in Africa. People think mainly about the private sector, I think. Is that correct? I have always worked within the framework of three sectors, which is the public sector, the private sector, and the social sector. And the public sector is often inefficient. The private sector promotes individual wealth, and the social sector promotes community economic benefit, measured in happiness, contentment, better living conditions, better education, health, better futures for children. The social sector is the one that is most advantageous for women, children, families, and communities. As my husband has shown in his recent published analysis of the Mali state and its collapse from democracy into terrorism, civil society is the second pillar of the Malian state. Civil society organizations are capable of improving governance, fighting corruption, and building wealth. Pessimism about Mali's short-term future is justified, but civil society organizations, the strength of women, and the country's social capital offer Mali a chance to turn failure into success. The economic mirror image of civil society is the social economy. We see the economies of Mali and other African countries composed of three essential parts: the public sector, private sector, and social sector. The public and private economies in many African sectors are relatively small and dominated by governments. The social sector, and what we describe as the social sector, is the civil society organizations, as well as economic groups, credit and savings. So the complementary role of community organizations, civil society organizations, and NGOs, I have always chosen to work with the social sector. In our work, we usually see these through three structures. Of course, the NGOs and non-governmental organizations or non-profits like Save the Children. Civil structures such as the CCA ONG in Mali that was mentioned, which is a coordinating mechanism for civil society structures, and other coordinating bodies for the NGOs in other African countries have been created to encourage coordination of activities, share approaches and methodologies, and to raise funds for joint projects. We also established what we called the Groupe Pivot in Mali. That was groups of specialization amongst the civil society organizations. So there was a group designed to work with health programs in the communities. There was a group of NGOs that was working with micro-enterprise and income-generating programs, and there was a group to work with programs on natural resource management. And these enabled us to create a whole civil society group that provided employment, that provided funds, that allowed us to make huge advances in working with rural communities to improve and manage their lives. So to sum up, I like to say that my own experience, which was a perfectly wonderful experience and has enabled me to work with many people who seriously wanted the improvements to their country, and has enabled us to improve conditions for women and children in many parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. I think we have time to take a few questions. Is there a question for Michelle? Yes, we have time to take a few questions. Yes.
How do you see the future of non-profits in Africa?
The future of non-profit. Oh, yeah. No, I see it in a very positive. I see it as a very positive move. You know, the NGOs it was very difficult when we first arrived. because it was very difficult to build relationships with the government, and we were considered to be non grata, persona non grata in a way. It's been very difficult to introduce non-profits, except if it was just to fund what was existing. You know, they liked the funds, but no, it was a good time. I think there's a huge future for non-profits, and I think it goes so well together with civil society organizations and community structures, and the real understanding that the NGOs actually are out there. They're out there in the countryside, which is not always the government, the case of the government.
Okay, do we have other want to ask questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then if there is no more question, first of all, first we have a small present for Poulton. This is what we are giving to people, right? This is Jefferson's cup, right? And just Van was telling me that Jefferson actually designed it himself. It's very beautiful. Then we have this small gift for you, and we know that this is nothing, but at least thank you. Okay, then after yes, yeah, we'll take the picture right here. Evelyn, I'm speaking. No. Okay, right here. Yeah, okay. Then we have someone here who want to say something about what Michelle really has done for their community actually in Mali. And it's Mr. Danseni Kone. You want to say something, about really something, Michelle has done. Right? Yes, Danseni Kone, right? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Morning, everybody. Just to witness what my sister Umukone did in our region. During her presentation, she talked about Kolonyeba. Kolonyeba is my native village. So, I saw what they did when we were working in the NGO, Save Children. So, in our native village, they built a lot of schools, a lot of care centers. So, the impact of the project is always existing in my own native village. So Umu is someone which is known in our, everybody knows about her in our country, village Kolonyeba. So here just to praise her what we did in our locality. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, for this. Yeah, okay. Then I will let you, eat and finish, okay, without talking too much. But just one thing, when we finish here at 1:30, right? The next session is starting at 1:30, and it will be at the Commons Theater. Okay? Then the Common Theater. Do you remember the first day, the theater we were all in? Then we'll gather there, and then we have this session on the medicine for all. Yeah, exactly. And that will be led by Frank Gupton here, who is here at the engineering school. And also we have Mr. Diomande from, Mr. Diomande from the Deputy Director de Cabinet, how do you say? Deputy Chief of Staff, right, of the Minister of Commerce in Cote d'Ivoire. They will be talking about this project of medicine for all. VCU is doing with the Iowa Institute of National Engineering School in Cote d'Ivoire, actually. Then the session will be about that. Then that is at 1:30 to 1:30 to 3 o'clock, okay? Then see you all at the theater, okay? And bon appétit if you haven't eaten it yet, okay? And bonne digestion for those of you who have already eaten, all right?